Hello and welcome to Odds on Premier League Match Day 3. We have already a lot of comments. Somehow people are talking about Man United. I don't know what happened yesterday, Tom, but looks like something important happened in a non-important competition, actually.
Well, I mean, it's a non-important competition for any team in Europe because they go in the next round, they get buys in this round, and they're essentially nearly quarterfinalists before they even arrive in the competition. For everyone who's not in Europe, it's quite a meaningful competition because there's not much to win. And Man United were beaten by League Two Grimsby last night, as famously supported by Harry the Haddock, which is an inflatable fish you can buy from the club store, which I highly advise you do, which I did at one point. We're trying to raise money to save the club.
2-3 years ago about the FA Cup. And I remember you saying that, actually. We analyzed Grimsby 2-3 years ago.
We did. Harry the Haddock. I was trying to find the video this morning, but I couldn't find it. It was definitely like a long time ago. But look, an amazing performance from them. And, you know, you want to make sure you give them credit. But the issue, and we'll do Man United in the show, of course, they face Burnley this weekend. They are so wedded to the idea that Amorim has got. He can't see the wood for the trees. There is a game going on in front of him, and he's looking down at his counters, trying to work out where people play. Watch the game, feel the vibe, make decisions. And instead, he's like, oh, I don't know. Let me play Dungeons and Dragons for 8 minutes and see if I can work this out. Like, it's a problem. It's a problem. Like, I think at this point, the job is too big for him. And again, I think they're going to need to move on from Ruben Amorim, which would be incredible. But he has been a monumental failure, I think it's fair to say at this point.
Indeed, well, Graham Potter or Bruno Fernandes also, or Ruben Amorim to be the first manager to be sacked. Probably they are both in the race. And don't worry, we are going to talk also about some game we have on Sunday. Some Liverpool-Arsenal might be important also. So stay with us. A lot to talk about, of course, also about Man City's defeat against Spurs. So everything here, right? Just leave your comments as you are doing. Press the like, as I hope you do, and subscribe to our channel. And now let's go on with the show. Well, we start with a derby, West London derby, Chelsea Fulham. Let's be posh, wear some etiquette to watch this game. I used to live nearby, by the way, so I love this area of London, Tom. And I'm enjoying so far Chelsea. Against West Ham, especially 5-1, although most of the danger came from set pieces. We will talk later about West Ham, but they are really vulnerable in set pieces. 𝗛𝗲𝗍𝗂 already giving some assists. 𝐬𝗵𝗿𝗲𝗀, I think he's going to score a lot of goals. Perhaps they are getting Fermín from Barcelona, which I think is a great player. I don't know if he's going to be suitable for Chelsea, but he's a great player for sure. And Fulham, 2 draws in the first 2 games, keeping themselves competitive, as they usually do, actually.
Yeah, I think Fulham's still short of a couple of players if they're going to have a really good season. But, of course, the window closes Monday, 7 p.m. local time. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, look, I was really high on Chelsea before we came into the season. We discussed it first week, and I was a bit disappointed, a bit strong, but surprised about the way the Palace game unfolded. They struggled to get up to top speed, but Crystal Palace are incredibly well organised and energetic and battling sort of team. That is not what West Ham are at this moment in time. And you know, we'll get to West Ham later. They've got a lot to fix. But Chelsea really took advantage of West Ham last week in fantastic ways. From the moment Lucas Paquetá scored the opening goal, the intensity level at Chelsea went up several notches for several minutes. And yes, again, defensively from set pieces, West Ham were poor. But in the game itself, some brilliant link play between Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo, who have grown monthly across nearly 2 years now playing together as a really effective partnership. I think Cole Palmer not playing and 𝗛𝗏𝗏 coming in last week gave them that pace on both sides, which with Cole Palmer, they don't necessarily have. Look, you don't get better when you don't have Cole Palmer, but you do have a better balance in this team, certainly without Cole Palmer. And Neto one side, 𝗛𝗏𝗏 the others, overlapping fullbacks, 2 incredibly intense central midfielders, and the partnership of João Pedro and Delap in the game. It all worked perfectly. The formation worked, the intensity was there, everything was perfect for Chelsea last week, and 5-1 flattered West Ham in the end, because Chelsea should have scored more open play goals and maybe could have won more convincingly. So going to be really intrigued to see how they get on this week. And I still think defensively there's some issues in terms of Chalobah and Tosin. Does Fofana come back in? Who knows how fit he is? I do have some concerns there for Chelsea in the macro of it all. But in the micro, the team looks real good. And the subs they can bring on look really impressive. Reece James comes on and just closes the game out last week. Jamie Gittins comes on and can add some pace to the team in the last 20, which maybe Pedro Neto starts flagging. I've never seen it, but maybe he does. Or 𝗛𝗏𝗏 last week starts flagging and they make a change. So really impressed by Chelsea, and I think they understandably go into this game as big favourites. In terms of Fulham, I think that last week against Man United, there were some good moments and there were some bad moments. There were some times where, look, first 10 minutes, Man United should have been 3 or 4-0 up. And they missed chances, hit the post. Leno made a really good save, and they struggled to get into it. I think 𝐿𝐵𝗵𝗏, from going from a player maybe 18 months ago I didn't rate at all, has become one of the better Premier League centre-halves. I think him and Anderson together are a really good partnership. I think it's important that Anthony Robinson comes back in, probably for Sessegnon, probably change your shape a bit. They seem to be a bit 5 at the back for long spells last week, which I don't think suits Fulham. And I think it's evident at the end of the game when they got back into their normal shape of 4-2-3-1, they looked a bit better. Plus, the conversation to be had about Emile Smith-Rowe coming in for Josh King and whether it's Jimenez or Muniz up front. I think that you'll probably see last week it was King and Muniz. I wouldn't be surprised to see this week it was Smith-Rowe and Jimenez, and they changed them over in the games. I think King, really good, exciting teenage player, but not quite there yet. What would you expect from an 18-year-old who's not played that much senior football? So got a good base, Fulham. And I think in every single game, they're going to be competitive. And that's all you can ask for. Like if you're an Everton or a Fulham or a Brentford or a West Ham or a Wolves, teams that could easily finish 8th or finish 20th, right? That whole group of clubs that if they have a bad season, it could go wrong really quickly. If you're competitive in every game, you will get enough points to stay up. And then once you've got that, you can build from there. So, and I think Fulham will be in that group to build from there. But close game this, tight game this. Fulham, of course, won this game last season and have picked up some really big scalps in recent times. But I do think that Chelsea will scrape through in a really tight encounter. It's going to be somewhere between the Palace game and the West Ham game for Chelsea. Take the Blues win at 1.56. In terms of score lines, 2-1 to Chelsea feels the most obvious to me. That scoreline comes in at 7.5. If you feel less brave than that, and I don't always advise exact score lines, but that's where the serious odds are, and 2-1 is the most common scoreline in football, Chelsea, both teams to score 3.25. And as you mentioned earlier, if you're looking for a scorer, you take João Pedro.
Well, 2-1, indeed, someone was mentioning it as well. Thousand Eyes first half draw, for instance, could be first half draw and then Chelsea to win. For sure it pays well. Jack Ryanair, Chelsea, Asian handicap, -1. Chelsea's intensity to match for Fulham this time. Well, let's move to the next one because we have to talk not about Burnley that much, but about Man United. Of course, you mentioned at the beginning how they lost in penalties in the League Cup. Everything was kind of positive even after the defeat against Arsenal in match day 1. Then everything started to be bad in the draw against Fulham with the penalty missed by Bruno Fernandes, complaining about absolutely everything. And now it's getting worse and worse and worse. This club, Tom, looks like a circus completely. It's been years and years like that, but looks like this season could be even worse.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a tough game on Thursday. There's no denying that. But I think there have been some positives, as you mentioned, against Arsenal and Fulham. And look, it's the shape. It's the shape of the team. It's the fact that he has one idea, Amorim, and is so dedicated to it. He'll play people out of position to the detriment of everyone else to try and make this shape work. And at this point, I don't get it. Like if you watch Tottenham in the first 2 games of this season under Thomas Frank, or you watched his Brentford team, they change formation like 4 times a game. There'll be 3 at the back, 5 at the back, 4 at the back. They'll go 2 up front, 3 up front. They'll change the midfield configurations. They will adapt and adapt and adapt. And look, that's not always a good thing. Sometimes that can lead you to looking a bit confused, but somewhere in between the two buckets, you need to land. And like Man United just don't change anything. And Casemiro can't get through an hour And so you always know that change is going to happen. Ahmad comes in for 𝗛𝗏 last week. It means you get theoretically better offensive options, but poorer defensive options. So you know what to plan for. If Ahmad's on, you're a bit further back. If 𝗛𝗏's on, you're a bit further forward. Mount and 𝗵𝗏𝗏 and 𝐿𝐭𝐤. Look, I like Mason Mount. I think he's a good player. But if you've spent whatever they spent on 𝐿𝐿𝐴 as the striker, make it work. Play him. Otherwise, you didn't want the striker, did you? Like, if he wants to play a front two of 𝗵𝗏𝗏 and 𝐿𝐭𝐤, it's great. It's a great idea. Don't buy a striker. You don't have to do this. No one made you buy Benjamin 𝐶𝐶𝐿. You could have bought someone else to play in midfield. Whatever happened to 𝗀𝐵𝗵𝐻? Like, I don't know. We can't do the whole thing. But, like, it just feels like they're too wedded to this shape. It hasn't worked for a year. They haven't got a plan B at all. And you add that to both goalkeepers are atrocious when it comes to dealing with crosses. They even played Tom Heaton. He can't deal with crosses either. Nana can't deal with crosses. Bayindir can't deal with crosses. Like, no one can deal with crosses in the box. And that leaves you with, if de Ligt don't get it, you're in serious trouble. I'd be looking at bringing Maguire back in the starting 11 for the league game. I know he played against Grimsby, but, like, they need someone in the box to be a bit more commanding. And without him, there's no one who can do it. And if you've got a corner against Man United, you've got every chance of scoring. So loads of issues, individual players underperforming, coach underperforming, and they need something big. They need something big to get the season going. And look, this is a lovely fixture. It is a lovely fixture. I know Burnley won last week against Sunderland, first home game back up. Leeds, Sunderland and Burnley have all won their first games back up, which is fantastic for them. But I still think they're all going to struggle across the season as the hard yards kick in. And I'm not particularly impressed by Burnley, frankly. I think that 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝗏𝗀 got injured last week. Well, he's always injured, so they lose their energy from central midfield. Josh Cullen scored last week. He's a tidy little player, but he's a championship player. Foster, Mejbri, Jakob Brun-Larsen. Look, they're all championship players that played really well last week. I still don't think Burnley will get more than 8 wins. I still think Burnley will go down bottom. And look, win this weekend, and maybe my mind starts to change. But I don't think there's enough Premier League quality there. They go into this game, they'll try and hold out, they'll try and defend like last season, and they'll try and nick a win late in the day. And look, if United struggle offensively, that might happen. But at the moment, I'm not in a position to bet on Burnley. So, pain me though it does, you take the Man United win at 137, and then you've got to look at ways they win. And it's going to be, I think, quite tight. I think United are going to be real nervy coming into this one. So take them to win by exactly 1 goal. That comes in at 3.5. That's 1-0 and 2-1 covered. Very common score lines. You can see it finishing 5-0, right? You could, but that's not something I'd put my money on right now. If 𝗵𝗏𝗏 and 𝐿𝐭𝐤 have amazing games, then yeah, they could. They're incredible players. But I'm not going to put money on that now. I will put money on 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝗏𝗀 to break his duck. Anytime goal scorer is 2.2. First goal scorer is 5. I think that's worth a punt. If anyone's going to score here, it will be 𝐿𝐭𝐤. And he is the kind of player that could get their season going.
Both missed 1 penalty, actually, in the League Cup. And last season, actually, at home, I think we saw some nervy game with Man United playing against relegation teams. At the end, they ended up winning them. But maybe in the last minute, Harry Maguire header or something like this. So could be something like that. The pressure here will be too much for Man United. Burnley to score 2 or more goals. This one is one to skip for Steve. 1,009. Man United 1. Burnley 0. Well, Amorim, by the way, he hasn't won back-to-back games yet in the Premier League, and wow, he's been already a while in charge. So it's time to wake up or move on, probably, for Man United and for Ruben Amorim. Well, you mentioned the newly promoted teams. Let's go to the Stadium of Light. Sunderland, Brentford, you said it. The newly promoted teams won their first game at home. Also Sunderland against West Ham, but lost away against Burnley. Also knocked out in the League Cup playing at home. Whereas for Brentford, they got 3 points, the first 3 points in the post-Frank era, with the win against Aston Villa at home, and also in this case good news for them in midweek, since they beat Bournemouth in the Carabao Cup.
Yeah, I mean, Sunderland are interesting in that I think everyone went a bit wild following their win over West Ham on the opening weekend of the season. Oh, they're going to stay up. Oh, they're going to challenge for Europe. They're amazing. Like, no, West Ham, we'll get to them later, but like they need to wake up to where they are and what league they're playing in very quickly. Otherwise, they could be in some serious trouble. And Sunderland took that assignment real seriously. And the intensity of their play went up in the second half. And in the end, look, they won 3-0, but actually they didn't have that many great chances. That the scoreline did flatter them a bit, frankly, with all due respect to Sunderland. So last week we saw a big fall to earth. And I think that, look, 𝐷𝗀𝐿 is an outstanding player, but he can't run much anymore, which means 𝗛𝗏𝗏 and 𝗪𝗐𝗍 have got to do a lot of his running. And they will do that, but I don't think they're as technically good as 𝐷𝗀𝐿 Xhaka. And you saw that a bit last week when they were trailing. It's a different skill set when you're a goal down. And up front, again, it's a good-looking trio, but I do think 𝐼𝗫𝗀 is still a championship striker who needs to improve in the Premier League, which I'm sure he will. I hope he does. But at the moment, I wouldn't guarantee a goal when the ball breaks to him. And the wingers, again, people like Simon Adingra, good player, pacey player, brings a lot to the game, but in his time in the Premier League has had flashes and then disappeared. So there's a lot of players at the club who could be sensational and they could fade into insignificance. And it's games like this that I still think it's early to define that. I think it's going to be game 10 to game 30 where it's really going to be defined. But I'm interested to see how they get on. I'm really intrigued to see how they get on against competitive opposition, which West Ham simply were not. And Burnley were last week. Plus, Ballard going off last week at centre-half takes away their defensive organiser, their powerhouse player. And to lose that defensively, whomever they bring in, I do think that's a problem. So, interested there to see how they get on. Plus, there will be a sense of after the Lord Mayor's show because the West Ham game was such a big, frenetic, amazing, we look forward to it for months thing. And now it's, oh, we've got another game and another game and another game. And now we're home against Brentford. Okay, do we care about Brentford? No, not really. Do we get up for this? Oh, I don't know. Like, again, it can happen. We've seen it happen, so we'll see how it plays out. In terms of Brentford, a couple of wins this week. Carabao Cup, you mentioned, against Bournemouth in a game where both teams changed their lineup quite a lot. So I'll go back to the previous game to see what the team's probably going to look like. And look, I think that there will be some issues in central midfield with Henderson and Yarmolenko playing there at some point this season. That's not great legs, I don't think, with that pairing. And it sort of showed last week when they brought on Frank the Tank 𝐿𝐴𝐴 and Matthias Jensen. Maybe they do that every game in central midfield. We'll see how it plays. I think Mikko Damsgaard was brilliant last week against Villa. He's continued his form from last season. And Ouattara had a pretty decent game on debut. But I don't know. Look, I still have my doubts about Brentford. I think that Collins and Vandenberg, good defensive pairing. Kelleher, not too high on him in goal. I think he's good, not great. Thiago up front, battering rammed a bit last week against Villa, but didn't look particularly technically proficient. Hopefully he's been out for a long time, so we'll see how that goes. So it's an interesting one for Brentford. If they can win a game like this, remember they struggled away from home for long spells of last season, then maybe we start talking about them not being in the relegation battle this campaign. This could be very important come the end of the season. I still think both will be bottom 6, bottom 7. So really interesting game. Don't know what to expect from Brentford in terms of offense, but I do think defensively they're going to be pretty strong. So look, frankly, screams draw at 3.4. I'll put that in. I think both teams are going to cancel each other out. I think it'll be quite low scoring. Take the 0-0 or the 1-1 as a group bet. That comes in at 4. I'd certainly look at the under 2.5 market here. And if you're picking out a player, I think Dango Ouattara is the one I'd pick out following his great performance last week. Anytime goal scorers 4. That ain't too bad.
This is a very tricky game. Sunderland at home will help. So double chance for Sunderland. Viper, but Brentford to win, according to Joe. 6-pointer game, according to Losjes. Both teams to score. Jack Ryanair. So also Arabin going for a draw. So this one is a tough one to call. Indeed, anything can happen. The next one, really one-sided, this one, but still good odds if you are backing the favorites. The great Spurs, what a start of the season for Thomas Frank's men. Also, remember, in the European Super Cup, they were this close to beat PSG, probably deserved to beat them, and they got themselves the first huge win of the season at the Etihad, 2-0. The Thomas Frank recovered also Richarlison. They knew how to counter-attack. Man City caught them in the brink. So cheers to them. Perfect start, Tom, for Bournemouth. They beat Wolves at home, something that looks easy at this stage of the season, and is one of the teams also out of the Carabao Cup.
Yeah, look, first things first, I've got to apologise to my colleagues here at Oddspedia for last week because I knew Chelsea were going to batter West Ham. I knew it. And yet I was sucked in by Man City being great against Wolves when I did my my safe bet. So I went for Man City, who lost to Tottenham. I got drawn in. I know we'll do some Man City later, but I got drawn in by it. And I should have said Chelsea, and I ballsed up the international accumulator on that. So that's my fault. That was my bad. I got drawn in by week 2 hysteria. I won't do that again. But maybe I will in terms of Tottenham because they've been great. It's just so good. PSG, you mentioned, fantastic performance. Fun though it was to see him lose the way they did and all that, for the neutrals. Spursy and all that. Didn't see that against Burnley. Didn't see that against Man City. And when you look at this team, I mentioned earlier, Thomas Frank is able to change the formation during the game if you want. He is a very robust, physical, get-about manager, but they can add some delicacy to that as well. Mo Kudus was awful for a year for West Ham, but he's immediately responded to Thomas Frank, so that's encouraging for Tottenham. He's getting something from Richarlison, something from Johnson, but really the midfield three of Palhinha, Sarr and Bentancur. Outrageous energy shown by that trio last week, and for me, that's the reason they won the game. Always like Romero and Van der Ven together. I'm sure 𝗵𝗶𝗀 is somewhere going, why couldn't I have played that two together a bit more last season? Maybe we'd still be at Tottenham. And Jed Spence been outrageously good. So individual players excelling, players off the bench bringing some energy late on, like Danso and 𝗵𝗶𝗀. So everything's great about Tottenham. I think they were brilliant against Burnley, brilliant against City. They're going to be a really intriguing test here to see if they can continue that against a team that could go either way still, Bournemouth, I think, as the season goes on. Lost a lot of talent, and transfer window still open. Incredible to me that no one's come in for 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐻 over this transfer window. We know Bournemouth will sell if the offer comes in. I could name you about 10 teams that he would walk into. So done a great job to keep him. I hope he does stay, but if he doesn't, we'll see how it goes. But look, I think 𝗛𝗏𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 at centre-half against 𝐸 looked good last week against Wolves, but Wolves didn't really offer much offensively. So this will be more of a test for them. Midfield trio of Scott, Tavernier and Adams is incredibly hard-working, a bit like Tottenham. So it's going to be a great battle, 3-on-3 this week. Not the biggest fan of Brooks on one side in terms of lack of pace. I think they are going to miss that this season unless they can get 𝐿𝐼𝐵 back into the fold, or maybe there's someone else they've signed who we haven't seen yet who can bring that pace on that side. And Evan Nilsson been quiet first couple of weeks as well. So look, we'll see how it goes. But it was a bit of a flat game last week against Wolves. So they looked a bit nervy, a bit out of sorts. Some of those players they were able to lean on last season weren't quite there for Bournemouth. So, I think Bournemouth work in progress. I think Tottenham have started the season perfect. You have to go the Spurs win at 1.76. I do think both teams will score. I do think it'll be quite tight. The 2-1 scoreline brings you in at 8, which I really like. I'd certainly look at both teams to score in this game and Tottenham win it in the end. And start of the season, who's impressed most for me offensively? It's Richarlison. Anytime 2.25 goal scorer. He just looks like the striker now. And Dominic Solanke is now the substitute. So if you're picking someone, I go for him.
Well, Richarlison looks like the star of Brazil now coming into the international break, actually, for Carlo Ancelotti. Well, Spurs to win is the normal thing, best chance, 1x. Well, the double chance for Tottenham shouldn't pay too much. Spurs to win 2-0, perhaps as Tom was saying, Semenyo, he's participated in the 3 goals scored by Bournemouth this season in the Premier League. He assisted last weekend and he scored 2 goals against Liverpool, if I'm not mistaken. So let's move to the next game. Is Wolves Everton. This one probably not that interesting. Tom, Wolves, 0 points. Only team with 0 points together with West Ham, 1-0 against Bournemouth, 0-4 against City. And Everton, you were correct in this prediction. They started their era in the brand new stadium with a win against Brighton. I guess here we shouldn't expect many goals.
No, I think that's a fair assessment. I think it'll be a very tight encounter. And look, the interesting thing about Wolves is that they were not great against West Ham in midweek. And then they can bring on Strand Larsen from the bench. And he destroyed West Ham's diabolical defence, scored a couple of goals in 2 minutes and got them through in the Carabao Cup. Last week, he struggled a lot, to be fair, Strand Larsen, but after they'd gone down to 10 in that game, it was sort of a bit like game over. I wonder how things might have been if Toty didn't get sent off, kind of basically start the second half. So we haven't really seen Wolves yet. because first game was City, second game 10 men for a long time. So I'm still really waiting to see exactly what they can put together this season. I do think that they've added some pace to their team during the summer, which they needed. I think Strand Larsen's one of the best strikers in the division. Double figures last season, couple of goals in midweek. So if he is still there by Saturday, I know Newcastle were chasing him. I'd be surprised unless they need the money if they sold him, because they sell Strand Larsen, they're in serious soup. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think offensively, they can score goals. We haven't really seen that yet in the league, but I think we will see it. My concerns are the other end. I think 𝐷𝗵𝗏𝗀 was all right last week, but he struggles. Doherty in the back three in 2025 is not a good idea. Total lack of pace in central midfield. It was 𝐿𝐵𝐼𝐻, 𝗵𝐷𝗀𝐻, and there's Andre as well. They play in those roles, but no one can really run. So I'm concerned about that. I'm not sure the fullbacks are as good as they were last season. The wing backs, like Müller-Wolfer, is not as good as Ryan Ait-Nouri. Maybe he'll get there, but not immediately. So I'd have my concerns about that. So much came through Ait-Nouri previously, and without him, I'm not sure of the quality, but we're going to see in a game like this. In terms of Everton, it's so classic Moyes. This is such a classic Moyes team all of a sudden. I think they are still short of some power in central midfield. Timo Rebenen can't really get around as much. 𝗀𝗏𝗏 𝐿𝐵𝗏𝗏 looks a bit old in central midfield, so I do think that's potentially a problem. But like the three behind the striker thing, it's vintage stuff. Dewsbury Hall and 𝗀𝗏 and Jack Grealish were fantastic last week. Barry and Beto, a bit interchangeable at the moment, central forward. Now, I think James 𝗏𝗏𝗏 had a really rough start to this season. I'll be intrigued to see what happens when Branthwaite comes back in, whether he might replace 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and Keane stays. I don't think he's fit for this weekend. So it'll be 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and Keane. And Jordan Pickford bailed him out last week a couple of times against Brighton. Great penalty save as well. So lots to like about Everton in the game last week. But, of course, in the game against Leeds, they didn't show up at all. So I think you're going to get that with Everton this season. Some good, some bad. They're not quite there yet in terms of like Moyes West Ham from 3 years ago or his best Everton teams. But you can see where it's going. You can see how they're going to play. They mix it up well. They're going to win some games this season. They're not going to be in a relegation scrap, I don't think. In terms of this game, absolutely screams goalless draw, frankly. A draw on its own is 3.31. If you take a winner, I would take Everton. I actually think of the two, they're the team with the goal threat as opposed to Wolves. If Strand Larsen either isn't there or is not on his game on the day. If he is, take Larsen anytime at double your money. But I do think under 2.5 goals, 1-0 win either way, or the draw. It's going to be a low-scoring, tough to watch, nickable game. And I would just shade for Everton, but it's going to be a draw.
Well, we have some people praising Grealish. Makes a huge difference to Everton, sacks players in and frees others to score. This is Joe and also 𝐿𝐵𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 here. Everton with Grealish are a different team. He's taking the odds for the toughest. Garbage game to watch.
Yeah.
George Armando is telling us. Indeed. And the next one is Leeds Newcastle, also here with a lack of number 9 in the case of Newcastle. Perhaps we also don't see many goals still with Isak in the club, but we don't know where he is. And no Gordon since he was shown a red card in the games against Liverpool. Is crazy, how good this team competes despite not having a number 9 top quality right now, and playing down to 10 men against Liverpool. At one point, remember, it was far away already on Monday, but they were this close to get a point from Liverpool. And Leeds at home, Tom, they beat Everton in the first match day. So would you agree also to see perhaps a low scoring game in this one?
Yeah, I think that's probably right, actually. Well, it's right unless Newcastle win. We'll get to it. Look, let's start with Leeds. I think that they were pretty average in the first game against Everton. I've not been particularly impressed by them at this point, and I think they were even worse against Arsenal last week, though Arsenal, of course, are very, very good. But I think that they're short. They're short. I think them and Burnley are short of having a real Premier League quality team. I think the midfield worked hard against Everton. I know they're quite excited about Stack in central midfield, who worked hard and got around the pitch. But at the moment, what I see is a championship central defensive pairing in Rodon and Patrick Struijk. And I see no improvement there from last time they were in the Premier League. The front three, Pirro, I don't think is clinical. Gnonto and James are going to be hit and miss. And I'm struggling, frankly. I'm struggling at the moment to see a team that are going to really compete and get 40 points in the Premier League. It's games like this where I don't expect them to get something. If they get something, that's going to keep them up. And maybe the work rate, maybe the enthusiasm of being in the new league, maybe a comeback from their poor performance in the Carabao Cup against Arsenal in the weekend just gone. I don't know. But at the moment, standard 4-3-3. They're going to try and overpower the opposition, and they're going to try and dominate the ball. And I don't think you could do that in Premier League games with a squad of this quality. We'll see. Tanaka, 𝐷𝗲𝗄, and Stack in midfield. If that three ends up being fantastic and they go on to sign for Liverpool in 3 years from now because they're so good, that changes everything. At the moment, jury's out. I've not seen enough of them, but certainly in the first couple of weeks, I'd be concerned if I was Leeds. They look short of quality to me to stay in the division. In terms of Newcastle, you mentioned it, that the work rate against Liverpool last week was almost inhuman in that second half. Absolutely fantastic. But games like that, you pay a price. And the price is Gordon being sent off. That was a clear red card every day of the week. And Gordon has since apologized for it. You lose Tonali to injury. It's not a deep squad, Newcastle. We keep on saying this. They're owned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And they are not pumping money into this team. And at some point, I don't know, it's weird. It's weird. And they keep talking about PSR and whatnot. It's not bothering Man City. They're finding ways around it. Newcastle, maybe they just can't. I don't know. It's too complicated for us to discuss here. But Alango is a smart signing. Jacob Ramsey is a smart signing. Gives them a bit of depth. But without Isak, there is no forward. I know 𝐷𝗲𝗄 came on last week and scored that levelling goal, but he's got to start this week. Is he a good enough starter to be up front for Newcastle? Maybe in this game. I think he's good enough to beat a championship opposition they're playing this weekend, but give him a go and see how it works out. They kind of have to now. And then in midfield, Ramsey comes in for Tonali. Fair enough. That's a solid signing. But Tonali gives so much in that midfield trio. And Joe Linton's out as well. So Miley comes in? I like Lewis Miley. Good player. Good little teenage player. But again, there's a lack of depth about Newcastle, which could prove costly in the end. Dan Burn was great on Monday. Share was good, but a lack of depth in centre half. They're just 3 or 4 players short. It's going to be a long season for Newcastle. And if they keep getting injuries, long-term injuries, and suspensions, and we don't know what's happening with Isak, I don't know. I'd have some issues there. But look, even with those players out, I'd still back them to beat Leeds here. The odds are really good at 2.18 to go to Leeds and win. So I'd snap your hand off for that. I'm struggling to see who's going to score goals for Leeds. Didn't look like they were going to score against Everton before they got that diabolical late penalty, which is never handball in a million years. Struggled last week against Arsenal, but again, caveats, Arsenal were far too good. Newcastle win to 0 at 3.75. That really, really jumps out to me. I think that's one to take this weekend. And also, group bets. Look, I think Newcastle win this 1-0, frankly. But then if they scored a second or a third late on to make it convincing, that wouldn't shock me. You can bundle those three together in a group, 1-0, 2-0, or 3-0, 4.33. Really, really good that. So another to take there.
Well, we have some people thinking that we will see goals. Actually, goal rain over 3.5 goals. Pathfinder, Marco, Newcastle to win and over 2.5 goals. Connats, Newcastle just to win is good value indeed. But also, B is asking us who is going to score for Newcastle. Not Gordon, not Isak.
No, Harvey Barnes can score. I think he looks fantastic. Alanga can score. I think 𝐷𝗲𝗄 can score. Bruno Guimaraes can score. I think there's players there that can score a goal. And who's going to score for Leeds? I'd say no one.
Well, games on Sunday. 4 games. Brighton, Man City is the first one. Luckily for Man City, they have Brighton still no wins this season. 1 draw against Fulham. They lost to Everton. And, a lot of questions also about Man City because probably they haven't changed things that it didn't work last season and they keep repeating. Also, this season, some problems in the defensive part, especially they were caught in the counter-attack many times in the game against Spurs. Now I'm also surprised to see Donnarumma arriving to the club. Great goalkeeper, but he doesn't play that good with his feet, and we know Guardiola's style. So some question marks about Man City. I think all question marks that we had during summer, during the FIFA Club World Cup, perhaps this 4-0 against Wolves was just where Wolves have been really poor so far. So there are still these issues with Man City, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with Man City. I think the Wolves' victory was really impressive. We were all really impressed by Reinders and 𝐻𝐿 and Bob and Haaland and all of that, right? We were very impressed by the way they were just able to pick Wolves apart. But again, it's a bit like when you play West Ham at the moment. Like, they're not there yet, Wolves. They're starting the season very slowly. And I think that may be, now I've seen them a bit more about Wolves than it was about Man City. And to be fair as well, last week, if the goalkeeper didn't make a howler for the second and there wasn't the ridiculous Guardiola high line for the first, I still think they played reasonably well, certainly in that first half, Man City. So hard to judge at this moment in time. But the issues are, you mentioned it, like Trafford had a nightmare game on his kind of Etihad debut in his second time at the club. Should have been sent off, I think, for the handball/foul on Kudus. I think his hospital pass into, I think it was 𝐿𝐭𝐚𝐲 was absolutely diabolical. And I don't know what's happened with Ederson, but I don't think he's coming back. And look, you mentioned Donnarumma, not signed yet as far as I'm aware. So it should be Trafford this weekend. And I don't know. I just don't think, I never thought he was a particularly good signing. I don't think he's good enough to be the Man City goalkeeper. And I think that sort of played out last week. We'll see what his recovery is like. Midfield still interesting. I think when Reinders and 𝐻𝐿 go last week, Gonzalez is left totally overwhelmed in midfield by the pressing of a intense midfield. You're going to get that from Brighton this weekend. That's going to be one to watch. And Ruben Dias signed a new contract this week and captained the team. Looks a bit washed at the moment, Ruben Dias. Dias and Stones, I don't think it's not as good as Arsenal's defensive pairing, certainly not as good as Liverpool's defensive pairing, not as good as a few centre-half pairings in the league. So they're not being protected as well by the way the team play. If they're going to play high line, there's not much pace turning back towards their own goal from Stones and Dias. And Rico Lewis, I'm still not sure if he's any good, let alone a right back. So again, we'll have to see how that goes. But look, offensively, they look really very good. And they can beat any team if they take their chances, which, would have happened last week as well. First goal is always key. In terms of Brighton, I'm not seeing much movement from last season. And that'd be my only concern about them. Like, Carlos 𝗵𝗿𝗄 and 𝐻𝐿𝐴, it's fine in midfield. We know 𝗵𝗵𝗄 is probably the next one off the conveyor belt to go for big money. But I'm not sure about the O'Reilly, 𝗵𝗵𝗄, 𝐻𝐿𝐴 midfield. It didn't get going last week. Going forward, Minte and Mitoma, fantastic players. But if they don't do something brilliant individually, what is there for Brighton offensively? I think it's a very conservative-looking team. And, I love Danny Welbeck, but is Danny Welbeck going to be a striker all season? And again, I know we've said that millions of times, but eventually that will run out. And so they could do with some investment there. And again, you're looking at new players that no one's really heard of beyond kind of football wonks. Like the guy who came on last week, his name I've forgotten, the defender, but also 𝐬𝐭𝐚𝐲 who came on. They might be amazing, but they might not be. It might not always work out for Brighton doing this sort of thing. So concerns there. Look, 𝗵𝗿𝗄, O'Reilly and 𝐻𝐿𝐴 on their day could overpower the City midfield in the same way Tottenham did last week. They could. But if they don't, City will win this game. And that's what I'm banking on. I think there'll be a reaction from City following the game last week. So take them to win at quite surprisingly high at 1.87. And then the way the game goes is a bit of a mystery to me at the moment. So I look at some individuals here and I pick one out for both teams. In terms of City, Erling Haaland started the season in fine goal-scoring form. To have 2 shots on target is 1.91. First goal is 1.83. Bundle those together with a City win, and you're going to make some money here. In terms of Brighton, Mitoma, what a chance he created for himself last week. Gaza style and hit the bar. I think he's the outstanding player for Brighton. If anyone does it, it's going to be him. To score or assist is double your money. So I would absolutely take that.
A lot of doubts about this game. There are some people saying a pass for this game. Man City to score over 1.5 goals. Haaland and Marmoush to score for Marco. Well, the odds are kind of low for Man City, as we should expect, but actually 1.8 one year ago exactly for Man City would be really high, but now it's difficult to trust. Of course, actually we have lower odds on Forest to beat West Ham. Obvious reasons why the odds are very low, and it's not because Forest are great, but well, they got 4 points, which is a great start. It's because West Ham, Tom, they've been pitiful in the first 2 games, especially in set pieces. Every ball in the box is a huge problem. Every corner it's a problem. All goals are coming from there.
Yeah, they are. Well, they're coming from everywhere at the moment for West Ham, and they need to fix that immediately. Let's start with Nottingham Forest. I could probably give you the exact same analysis I gave you last season for them, that I just replaced 𝗀𝗲𝗏 for Elanga, who's gone. Beyond that, it's exactly as you were. They low block, they play with intensity, they play long balls on the floor through to someone who's goal side, and they create chances. And they've scored goals in both weeks and had chances in both weeks from doing that. 𝗵𝗵𝗄 struggled last week, was outstanding in the first game. Chris Wood scored goals in the first, struggled a bit last week, but in 𝗀𝗲𝗏 and Hudson-Odoi, they always create chances. And the midfield pairing is fantastic. Like, we keep talking about this, and we'll do it with West Ham in a second. If you don't have pace and power in the Premier League, you will struggle. And you know who knows that? Nuno. And Anderson and 𝗀𝗏𝗄, that's pace, power, precision. That's a perfect pairing in central midfield for the Premier League. And you saw it last week when it started going against them a bit against Crystal Palace. That pair stepped up and wrestled control back for Nottingham Forest in that game. I was surprised, actually, to see 𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗄 linked with West Ham this week. Maybe they just need to raise some money, Forest, because they've brought in so many players. James McAtee and Hutchinson and several others. So kind of see how that plays. I'd love to see, as a West Ham fan, 𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗄 in my midfield, because I think he brings everything that West Ham are currently lacking. So look, you know how Forest are going to play. They're obviously big favourites for this one. I think West Ham are incredibly interesting, I've got to say. They were allowed under Graham Potter to coast through the back end of last season. They coasted through pre-season. And I think that lulled certainly me into a bit of a false sense of, yeah, they'd be okay. Not at the moment. Look, horrible fixture to start the season. I think that's fair to say. But they don't look competitive. We spoke about Fulham earlier on. You might lose games, but you've got to be competitive. And West Ham currently aren't. Firstly, the Amorim Potter formation doesn't work. It doesn't work. Like, this shape in the Premier League does not work. So stop doing it. Graham Potter's not meant to be a kind of ideologue in the way that Amorim is, and yet he keeps on playing this formation that simply does not work. You can't play a midfield two of James Ward-Prowse and Tomáš Souček. You just can't. They haven't announced any new signings yet, West Ham, which is insane with the window closing on Monday. These issues have been clear for a year. And they haven't brought anyone in to play central midfield who can run yet. So, I mean, if it's Ward-Prowse and Souček, good night, nurse, in this game. They've got absolutely no chance. If they play this formation, they've got absolutely no chance. And you mentioned defenders. They've got three centre-halves, but they keep conceding headers. Corners, two against, at least one against Larson, and the winning goal against Larson in the Carabao Cup midweek. Got to drop the three at the back. 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗄's fat, slow, and lazy. Can't play him. Useless. Max Kilman, the weakest centre-half in history. Can't play him. I think 𝐜𝐭𝐤's okay. Not a good defender, but with someone physical alongside him might be all right. I'd like to see West Ham go back to four at the back this weekend and continue with it. Get rid of 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏, get rid of Kilman, who have fought hard, considering they're £80 million worth of player. What are you talking about? Play Mavropanos, play 𝐜𝐭𝐤, Diouf and Wan-Bissaka as your back four, pack out the midfield, bring in Potts with Souček and Ward-Prowse if there's no further signings, get Paqueta left, Bowen right, and bring in Wilson, because Nicholas Füllkrug is just a gigantic flop. Like, you can't keep playing this old geezer. Can't keep doing it. He's old, he's slow, he's useless. Got to stop playing him. Will they do that? No, probably not. They're going to go 3-4-1-2 and get beaten 5-0. So that's what I'll be looking at this weekend. And unless they bring in some players before then, they've got absolutely no chance, because there's no energy in this team. And they'll get walloped, West Ham, frankly. So Forest win, 1.78. Take that. I think they're going to win heavily. So Forest minus 2.5 is 6. Yeah, take it. 3-0 at least. West Ham are conceding a bunch of goals. They're great at set pieces, and West Ham can't defend them. Has Graham Potter learned anything from the first few weeks? He seems a bit stupid, so probably not. So that's 3 at least. Forest win to 0 is going to score for West Ham. Nicholas Füllkrug, give me a break. 2.75. If you feel more conservative, minus 1.5, 2.88. Take that as well. Forest at least 2-0 here, unless West Ham buy, a midfield by Sunday. We'll see.
Füllkrug looks homeless. He is telling us Forest -1, Forest halftime win. Of course, no one is trusting West Ham. Is Potter risking being sacked soon?
I don't think so, only because West Ham, I don't think they have a pathway to the next manager. It's kind of why he's got the job. I think Potter will be there until at least November. If they're bottom of the league with no points by November, no one survives that. Literally nobody. I think they'll pick up some points at some point, but it depends who they sign. I'm staggered they haven't signed players. Staggered. So not this weekend, but 6 weeks from now, if there's no wins, no one survives that.
Maybe 𝗀𝗵𝗿𝗀𝗍 is available again. Could be.
I actually I don't understand this, Edu, but he's actually worse than 𝗀𝗻𝗍𝗀. I didn't think that was possible, but there we are.
This is a rule of life, actually. Everything that is bad is, we can make it worse.
It can always get worse.
It can always go even worse. This is a rule of thumb that you have always to take in consideration. And, well, the game of the games, of course, this weekend, almost this season. It's a bit sad that it came so early, in my opinion, end of August, and we already have this Liverpool Arsenal. What a game. Both teams got the first 6 points in a different way, I have to say, because Liverpool, they are conceding a lot of goals. 6 goals conceded, counting also the Community Shield. And even the game against Newcastle, it was completely under control, 2 goals up, playing against 10 men. And at the end, they had to wait until the very last minute from a youngster, a kid, almost to win the game. And with Arsenal, Tom, same, I would say. No goals conceded. Against Man Utd, they were far from brilliant, but they got the 3 points. And against Leeds, it was also all about set pieces. So in this clash, actually, last season, both games were draws, were 2-2. And to see a Liverpool win in the Premier League, we have to go back to March 2022. It's been a while, actually.
Yeah, really good game this, and I quite like it coming early in the season. I'd like the second game to be last week of the season, but I quite like to see where they both are as the transfer window closes. And you mentioned it, like offensively, Liverpool have been fantastic. 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿 has been incredible. Salah, even though he hasn't been quite at his best, looks threatening. 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐿𝐴 looks good. Florian Wirtz, yeah, not quite there yet, but when he's on the ball, you can see where the potential is. Gravenberch and 𝗵𝗡𝗍 were great on Monday. 𝗵𝗡𝗍 exceptional, starting the game at right back and then sort of floated around the field. But you mentioned it, and we spoke about it at the Community Shield as well. Van Dijk and 𝐿𝐼, something's not right there. Something isn't right. I don't think it's Van Dijk. We know where Van Dijk is now. He doesn't attack like he used to, not as aggressive as he used to be, but still a great reader of the game. Someone has to do his running. Someone has to really be alert and alive next to him, and 𝐿𝐿 isn't doing it. There are a couple of times where he sort of come over all aggressive to try and protect him, but he's not peak Andy Robertson, 𝐿𝐿. It's a downgrade from the Robertson of 4 years ago at the moment. And 𝐿𝐼, I just think he's erratic. I think he's an erratic centre-half, and I think that needs to be addressed by Liverpool. It's the only position that needs to be addressed, but I do think it needs to be addressed. Plus, we'll see whether Frimpong and Conor Bradley can get fit, and one of them nail down that right back spot in the 4 they're going to play. So defensively, there are some issues. Offensively, no issues at all. It's sort of like Liverpool have been spectacular and inconsistent across the first few weeks of the season, whereas Arsenal have been solid and unspectacular. I know they won for 5 last week against Leeds, but, you know, Leeds aren't a Premier League squad. You kind of expect that in the end. And there was a couple of kind of late goals that rub salt into the wounds. But, like, defensively, they've nailed it, Arsenal, right? That back 4 and the keeper, they can make a couple of changes, be it Timber, be it White at fullback. They could change the left back, 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐿𝐴 or 𝗀𝗻𝗄, but you know it's going to be 𝗀𝗻𝗄 and Saliba. You keep that group fit, they ain't going to concede 20 goals this season. That's how solid it is. Zubimendi looked fitter last week than he did against Man Utd the previous week. He'll only get better. Declan Rice still spectacular. Of course, they have the issue this week with Bukayo Saka being injured. The good news is that 𝗵𝗿𝗍𝒄 come in. So now it's 𝐬𝐵𝒄, 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐿𝐴, and I think 𝗵𝗏𝗂 will be the front group. Hey, that ain't too bad. For anyone. There's creativity, there's pace, there's guile. Losing Saka's a big problem. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a world-class player, and he's carried Arsenal on his back for some time during the dark days and the good days. Without Bukayo Saka, it's never quite worked. So, huge game to make your debut for 𝗵𝗿𝗍𝒄. But who would doubt him? I wouldn't doubt him from what I've seen over the last couple of years. So, I think they will carry threat. And the goals from 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐿𝐴 were important last week. The first goal especially was classic 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐿𝐴. That's the kind of goal we've seen him score for Coventry and Sporting for years on end. Can he do it in the Premier League? Yeah, absolutely he can. And I think he'll score 20-plus goals this season. So it's all there for Arsenal. And these will be the top 2. And I think they'll be the top 2 by some distance as well. So this game may go on to decide the season. You mentioned the recent scorelines between the 2. Got to look at that draw at 3.6. Absolutely screams it. I think they might cancel each other out. It's all about whether Arsenal can win a game like this. If they do, I think we all scramble to change our pre-season predictions, and you lump on Arsenal to win the league if they can win games like this. It's this sort of game, not winning it, that's cost them over the last 3 seasons. 1-1 is 7. 2-2, as it finished last season, is 12. Really very nice. I like that a lot. If you were to pick a winner, I would just shade for Arsenal. I just think they look better defensively. And if Bukayo Saka was here, I'd definitely go for them. Without Saka, I know I said how much I like 𝐬𝐻𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐿, but I do have a couple of doubts on that. Maybe it's going to take a few weeks to get in his new team, whatever. But Arsenal win at 3.5. That's definitely worth a bit of money. And you pick out 2 goal scorers that look fantastic. 𝐿𝐭𝐿 anytime at 2.75. 𝐬𝐭𝐚𝐲 anytime at 2.75. Pick a score, add your scorer, your W money.
Well, this match is definitely a defining one for Arsenal when I win the league. Put this match to bed. I remember actually 2-3 years ago going to the City ground and just playing for the draw. And you were telling me this is not enough. If you want to win the league, you want to beat or you need to beat your rivals. Indeed, there will be goals. Another one with a draw for 𝐿𝐿, same as Tom is saying. Verse looks like a worse version of 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏, which I don't know who is 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏.
Kiernan 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏, Everton, Chelsea, Leicester legend. How dare you?
Sorry about that. But well, he needs some time. Regardless of the price tag, I think he also needs some time to adapt to the Premier League. Well, draw will be fair for both, so it looks like a draw with a lot of goals could be a good option. What a game. And after this, we have another game, actually, to enjoy in the Premier League before watching some random games in the road to the World Cup. We have Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, and actually it's a good one. This one as well, because we've seen a bad start from Aston Villa. The market, we were saying, that was not good, and only 1 point in 2 games, no goals scored. And they are facing Palace, which is kind of the opposite. They've been really good in this start of the season with a lot of draws against good teams. Chelsea, Forest, they are playing conference on Thursday, and they are looking on a replacement to 𝐻𝐻𝐿. It looks like it's going to be a Spaniard, Tom, Jeremy Pino from Villarreal.
Yeah, interesting transfer that. And shows where Palace are at the moment, right? They can attract someone from Villarreal, and they've got a manager in Oliver Glasner, one of the best in the league. So
I think it shows more where La Liga is than where Crystal Palace is.
This is true. You can get quadruple your money in England than in Spain.
Exactly.
People don't come to Crystal Palace, I guess, just for the football. That's a good point. Well made. But look, let's start with Villa. I'm worried about Villa. I'm not in the kind of long term of the season relegation battle sort of thing, but they're undercooked. They ain't got the players. Like across the last couple of years, it was Watkins and Ings, and it was Watkins and Duran, and now it's Watkins and no one. Like, they need a second forward to rotate with Ollie Watkins, and currently they don't have that. Donyell Malen and Evan Guessand on the bench. Yeah, fine. They're okay, but they're not Ollie Watkins replacements if the game starts to drift away from them. So I'd be concerned about that. I think that they're just a couple of players short. And if in this game, I'd like to see Malen start. I'd like to see Guessand start. And I'd like to see a plan for a front three. I think you saw last week against Brentford really struggle to create, really struggle to get up the field. And then midfield has also dominated games recently. Kamara, Tielemans, and Nana had poor games, I thought. They didn't get going. With the injury, I think, fairly early to Kamara. Nana struggled without him and got taken off as the game went on. The replacements, I don't know. I just think there's a lack of depth at the moment about Villa, and I think they're going to need to... They're going to need to work through that. They're going to need to bring at least 2 players in, or get McGinn back into central midfield and move someone out. So concerns there. So I'm intrigued to see how they get on in this game, Aston Villa. If they're at their best and they play their strongest 11, I think they beat Crystal Palace, who have never played in Europe. They don't play often more than a 50-game season. They're away. Forgive me, I've forgotten the team. Not Frederiksberg. It's Frederiksville or some nonsense. They're playing in the Conference League on Thursday, but they're away from home. Got to come back. Not much rotation. They were fine last week against Forest in that draw. But again, look, if you lose a pair of 𝐻𝐻𝐿, it don't matter who comes in. And the new man's not going to be by the weekend, I don't think. If he is, it's kind of throwing somebody in. They've lost their best player. He's their best player by a huge margin. And I think the coach is good enough to coach them through it. I think the players that are still there are good enough to manage their way through it. but it's a cake without the cherry on top. Without 𝐻𝐵𝗲𝗍, would they have won the FA Cup? Would they have won the Community Shield? Would they have got a top half finish? It's no, no, and no from me. So big shoes to fill. And the squad are going to be worse off for it. We still don't know about the future of 𝗏𝗏𝗀 as well. I thought was the outstanding player on the field against Forest last week. So, look, I think just in terms of having played in Europe in midweek and in terms of not being used to that, being away from home, losing 𝐻𝐵𝗲𝗍, can't go Palace, got to go Villa. Villa win 1.95, take it. I think Villa win under 2.5 is most likely. That's 1-0 or 2-0 at 4.33. To cover your bases, go Villa and under 3.5. That's 2.63. It screams 1-0 Villa to me, frankly. That's what I'm going with.
Okay, well, many people are praising the odds for Palace and are taking Palace. Actually, double chance for Palace from B, backing Palace all the way around. And we have Joe, Villa fan. Villa have been toothless. Buendia, Malen, and Madsen needs to start. His opinion, also Pathfinder, Villa had a slow start this season. They need to raise their game. So it might begin in this match. Well, Tom, this is it. Great games in this match day 3. Actually, this one we have a really interesting weekend ahead of us in the Premier League. Before we go with your safe bet, which we know is not going to be Man City, we have to remind our audience that you can play in our tipster competitions. You can participate absolutely for free and win some cash prizes thanks to Oddspedia. Again, completely free to participate. There you go. Monthly one. Now it's good to start in September. And we have our Premier League tips section and rivals where you can create your own tipster competitions. Well, guys, this is it. Tom, safe bet?
Yeah, there's a few this weekend actually I quite like, but the biggest one is Nottingham Forest to beat West Ham United. West Ham are so weak right now and underpowered, and Forest at home have all the attributes to smash the Hammers, and they will. 1.67.
And your accumulator ACCA parlay?
Yeah, treble this week. Chelsea to win over Fulham. A little bit risky there, but I like the look of Chelsea. Tottenham been fantastic. They'll beat Bournemouth at home. You throw Forest in there as well, who'll smash poor old West Ham. That's 4.25. Like that.
You need a win, Tom, in your ACCA. You are under pressure at the moment. Same as Amorim.
How dare you? How dare you? I've got credit in the bank, mate. How dare you? But yeah, that would be nice.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, everyone, for watching. See you in 2 weeks with the Premier League. Bye-bye.